I really appreciate everyone coming out. We never know what the weather's going to be like in New England, but I really appreciate you all coming out today. I'm delighted to see you all here. I'm Elizabeth Smith. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. I'm also Professor of Biological Sciences, and I'm the founder and co-director with Christy Clemens of the Dialogue Project. This is a key initiative within the more general framework of Dartmouth Dialogues, and it is intentionally focused on equipping the Dartmouth community with hands-on skills in such areas as empathetic listening, managing emotions, and finding points of connection. Developing these skills has perhaps never been more important, especially as we enter an election year. Today, I'm excited to kick off our partnership with StoryCorps' One Small Step. We are honored that Dartmouth's collaboration will be One Small Step's first institution-wide partnership with a college or university. One Small Step seeks to remind the country of the humanity in all of us, even those with whom we disagree. This initiative brings two people with different political views together to record a 50-minute conversation and not to debate politics, but to learn who we are as people. This unique collaboration will enable our students, faculty, staff, and alums to forge new bonds of trust and connection and to practice vital dialogue skills. One Small Step has been preparing for this launch for months and has already facilitated some student conversations. I want to express my gratitude to their dedicated team, led by Creative Operations Director Jacqueline Van Meter, and to our students who already participated for their enthusiasm and commitment to this important work. In today's program, you'll get to learn about One Small Step from StoryCorps founder and president, Dave Isay. Next, we'll share some excerpts from some of the conversations that have already been recorded at Dartmouth, and you'll hear from two participating students. Professor of Physics and Astronomy and celebrated author Marcelo Gleiser will then moderate a Q&A between Dartmouth President Sian Beilock and StoryCorps President Dave Isay, and you'll have a chance to ask questions that you might have. Finally, I hope you'll all join us for a reception in the foyer after the program. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce StoryCorps President Dave Isay. The founder and president of StoryCorps, Dave, is a New York Times bestselling author. Dave started making public radio documentaries almost 40 years ago and is the recipient of numerous Peabody Awards and a MacArthur Genius Fellowship for that work. His life's work taps into the heart and soul of the human experience. In 2003, Dave founded StoryCorps, an independent nonprofit organization based in Brooklyn that has brought over 700,000 Americans together, two at a time, to record intimate conversations about their lives, create human connection, pass wisdom from one generation to the next, and leave a legacy for the future. Each conversation is preserved at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. StoryCorps is the largest single collection of human voices ever gathered, and millions listen to StoryCorps' weekly broadcast on NPR's Morning Edition. In 2015, Dave was recognized with the $1 million TED Prize awarded annually to one exceptional individual with creative, bold vision to spark global change. Dave is currently leading StoryCorps' work to help decrease toxic political polarization in the United States through their latest effort, One Small Step.
Great to be here. Thank you for coming out on this cold, rainy day. We are thrilled to be launching One Small Step and Dartmouth today. I'm gonna do a whirlwind history of the 20 years of StoryCorps from the very first days until today in Hanover in about 12 minutes. So hold on to your hats. Before we start, I'm just curious, who here has heard of StoryCorps? Everybody. Oh my God. Okay. Who here has participated? A lot of people, including my in-laws who are right there, Mike and Betsy, who live in Hanover, Ripley Road. And who here has no idea what they're doing here and is just counting the minutes until they can get their dinner and get home? Okay, nobody, okay, somebody's lying. Somebody doesn't know what StoryCorps is. Dean Smith explained it very well. StoryCorps, the big StoryCorps started 20 years ago. A very simple idea. We put a booth in Grand Central Terminal where you can bring anyone who you want to honor by listening to their story. Your in-laws, a parent, grandparent. You come to the booth, you're met by a facilitator who works for StoryCorps. Jacqueline was a facilitator at one point. And you are led into the booth, the door shuts, and you sit across from your grandmother for 40 minutes. Complete silence, sacred space, lights are low. And I knew from making radio documentaries for decades before starting StoryCorps that the microphone gives you the license to say things, to ask things you've never talked about before. So from the very beginning of StoryCorps, people thought of this as if I had 40 minutes left to live, what would I say to my grandmother? What would I say to my mom? What would I ask of them? Everybody cries in StoryCorps interviews. Except maybe not my in-laws. I'm not sure. And at the end, as Dean Smith said, you get a copy and another one stays with us and goes to the Library of Congress, so that your great-great-grandchildren can get to hear your grandmother through her voice and story. And really, as Dean Smith said, we've had about 700,000 people participate. And because of the nature of what happens in the StoryCorps booth, people saying the important things to the people who are most important to them, we're kind of collecting the wisdom of humanity. So I'm going to just start by playing you. And so we launched in New York. At first, nobody had any idea what we were doing. The booth was empty. It was a complete failure. But then it got incredibly popular, and we launched all over the country. And we have Airstream trailers that travel around collecting family stories. So just to give you a taste of the big signature StoryCorps before we talk about One Small Step, I'm going to play you a story from Jackson, Mississippi. And if you go to the next slide, this is Albert and Aiden Sykes. Aiden, I think, is 11 or 12, and maybe a little bit younger. And he came to one of our Airstream trailers with his dad, Albert. And these are 40-minute interviews. You're going to hear a 3-minute excerpt from the 40-minute interview. This is just what happens in the StoryCorps booth. So let's watch.
Do you remember what was going through your head when you first saw me?
I remember when the doctor pulled you out, the first thing I thought was that he was being too rough with you. And he actually held you like a little Sprite bottle, and he was like, "Here's your baby." That was the most proud moment of my life. Don't tell your brothers, because it's 3 of y'all. But it was like looking at a blank canvas and just imagining what you want the painting to look like at the end, but also knowing you can't control the paint strokes. The fear was just, I got to bring up a black boy in Mississippi, which is a tough place to bring up kids, period. But there are statistics that say black boys born after the year 2002 have a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison. And all 3 of my sons were born after the year 2002.
So, Dad, why do you take me to protest so much?
I think I take you for a bunch of reasons. One is that I want you to see what it looks like when people come together, but also that you understand that it's not just about people that are familiar to you, but it's about everybody. Did you know the work that Martin Luther King was doing was for everybody and it wasn't just for black people?
Yes, I understand that.
Yeah. So that's how you got to think. If you decide that you want to be a cab driver, then you got to be the most impactful cab driver that you can possibly be.
Are you proud of me?
Of course. You my man. I just love everything about you, period.
The thing I love about you never give up on me. That's one of the things I will always remember about my dad.
You said it like I'm on the way out of here or like I'm already gone.
So, Dad, what are your dreams for me?
My dream is for you to live out your dreams. It's an old proverb that talks about when children are born, children come out with their fists closed because that's where they keep all their gifts. And as you grow, your hands learn to unfold because you're learning to release your gifts to the world. And so for the rest of your life, I want to see you live with your hands unfolded.
So that's a taste of the big StoryCorps, the collecting the wisdom of humanity. And I think one of the lessons that we've learned through StoryCorps, again, 700,000 people, every part of the country possible, and the facilitators, we've had more than 1,000 of them serve a year or two as StoryCorps, collecting these stories, bearing witness to these stories. When you ask them when they come back from being on the road what they've learned, to a person, they give a version of the Anne Frank quote that people are basically good. And there might have been some kind of a selection bias when we were in the hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands, but when you get into the kind of numbers that we're looking at, there's got to be some truth to that. And that's what One Small Step is predicated on. About 8 years ago, we started thinking about the toxic polarization in the country, not the fact that we disagree with each other or that we argue with each other, which is fantastic and healthy, but what happens when we stop seeing each other as human beings, which is incredibly dangerous, and what's happening, and this is happening more and more in the country. And before I talk about One Small Step, I'm going to play another story that takes place on a college campus that was one of the inspirations that got us really thinking deeply about One Small Step. Just about the time we were thinking about whether we could take our knowledge as a nonprofit in the human connection business and throw it up against this growing problem in the country. So this is 2016, and we're in Austin at the University of Texas. There was a protest. Joseph Weidnick was there. He's a laid-off sheet metal worker. It's an anti-Trump protest. Joe Weidnick wore his Make America Great Again hat. And Amina Amdeen, who was a student at UT Austin, was there as well. And they came to StoryCorps to remember the moment that first brought them together. So let's watch.
I noticed you with the hat, and I noticed that you were surrounded by some people, and I noticed that they were being kind of threatening, and then somebody snatched your hat off your head. And that's the point where something kind of snapped inside me because I wear a Muslim hijab, and I've been in situations where people have tried to snatch it off my head.
Wow.
And I rushed towards you, and I just started screaming, "Leave him alone, give me that back."
I don't think we could be any further apart as people, and yet it was just kind of like this common, that's not okay moment. You are genuinely the only Muslim person I know. It's not that I've actively avoided, it's just,
Yeah.
I've just never been in the position where I can interact for an extended period of time. So I guess my views on the Muslim community have been influenced by a lot of the news articles and things of that nature.
I feel like a lot of times in the media, you don't see the normal Muslim, the one that listens to classic rock like I do. You don't meet that Muslim.
Can you tell me about where you grew up? What was that part of your life like?
So I was born in Baghdad, in Iraq. I moved to the U.S. when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
Being a Muslim girl, I stood out in almost every single way that you can in middle school, the worst time to stand out. What about you? How was it like when you grew up?
I was homeschooled, so it was a vastly different experience socially. I didn't have, I guess, as many friends as most people would. I only went to public school 1 year of my life, and I got in 3 fights, and I lost all of them. I actually lost a lot of friends because of this election, because of my political stance. So I hope that I can be the reason that someone decides to talk to someone as opposed to just cutting them out of their life or blocking them on Twitter,
I'd like for this to encourage other people to engage in more conversations with people that you don't agree with.
That's what it's all about. I'm so glad I wasn't the only one who felt like that.
So that interview is kind of a call to action for us. And we started developing this new program called One Small Step. All of the participants in StoryCorps up to that time, the hundreds of thousands of participants, have known and loved each other. And we started experimenting with putting strangers together for the first time across the political divides, as Dean Smith said, not to talk about politics, but just to get to know each other as human beings under the premise and I think the truth that it's hard to hate up close. Our Hippocratic oath is to do no harm to people who come to StoryCorps. We're very focused on the participants. So we spent years and years and years developing this new methodology, testing the new methodology. Around the time of that 60 Minutes piece a couple of years ago, we launched in our first 4 cities and have continued to test it and evolve the methodology. At the same time, the issue of toxic polarization in the country has, as you all know too well, has gotten increasingly more serious. If you go to the next slide. So these are just some stats, recent stats. 4 in 5 voters now describe the other side as hateful and brainwashed. 1 in 10 voters regard people with different politics as theirs as reasonable. At the end of 2021, 15% of Americans said that we may have to resort to violence to save our country. 24 months later, 23% of Americans said that, so that's an increase of 50% in 2 years. So the good news is that polls also show that about 87% of the country are part of the exhausted majority. They are sick of the division, they're scared of where this is leading us, and they're looking for a way out. So we got the One Small Step methodology down to a science. We found that we've done thousands of these. We've had about 5,000 participants so far in 40 states. And we found that almost to a person, people go in scared doing this, and they come out friends. And Sandy, our CEO, Sandy Clark, is here. And we were talking a few months ago and realized that we have this, tested, shovel-ready, scalable methodology with the tsunami coming at us. And that it was time to get this to greater scale and to do it quickly. So in September, I shot President Beilock a note a couple of weeks before her inauguration that we're on to something special with One Small Step. And 10 days later, and I don't think most universities work like this, we had developed our first ever campus-wide 3-year One Small Step partnership here in Hanover with Dartmouth. So if you don't already know this, your president does not mess around. And today we're thrilled to be launching One Small Step Dartmouth as part of the Dartmouth Dialogue Project. It is a 3-year effort to connect students and alums, faculty, staff, across the divide, strangers, to get to know one another as human beings. And just to give you a taste of what's to come, we recorded some test interviews a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to listen to an excerpt again. Actually, One Small StoryCorps interviews are 40 minutes for reasons I don't have time to go into in my 12-minute slot. The One Small Step interviews are 50 minutes long. So this is a very short excerpt from a 50-minute interview between Adithi and Joseph, both class of 24. Adithi is majoring in psychology. Joseph is majoring in religion and philosophy. And this is just a few minutes from their 50-minute conversation. So let's watch.
When I was growing up, I always had these worries. My parents thought it was just anxiety and I would grow out of it. But the pandemic made it really, really bad. And that really shaped my beliefs about mental health. How did the pandemic influence your personal beliefs?
My dad got really sick. He was in hospital for 2 weeks. And that's actually a big part of why I switched from science to religion at Dartmouth, maybe changing the trajectory of my life.
That's crazy. Wow.
I did feel a little embarrassed by how a lot of people on my side of the political spectrum reacted during COVID. Unfortunately, I think it became a political issue.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever feel like there are times when people that share your political beliefs react in ways that you wish they didn't?
I think a lot of people aligned with my political beliefs were doing the similar thing where you see this issue as you're right or you're wrong, this black or white issue. But in reality, we all live in the gray, and understanding where you come from and how much thought you've put into what you believe has given me more respect for people with different beliefs than I have. There's so many more nuances that you can only know if you take the time to be open-minded and speak to someone. So yeah, thank you. I learned so much from this conversation. It was great.
Thank you. I'm glad we did it.
So we're really happy to have Joseph and Adithi here with us in the first row. Can you just wait? There you go. Our celebrities today, and we're going to hear from them in a couple of minutes. We are thrilled to be on this journey with Dartmouth. We think that the Dartmouth community has the potential to model for the rest of the country what it looks like when we're able to see the humanity of people with whom we disagree. Given the moment, it does seem kind of absurd that a school can be at the forefront of the fight to counter polarization in the country, given the news that we hear from campuses all over the country every day. But why not? What people we hear this all the time, Sandy and I, as we travel the country, people are sick of this, they're tired, it's enough. Why can't college students show us the way out of this dysfunctional discord that's tearing our country apart? Maybe, just maybe, the Dartmouth community can help pull our country back from the brink. One of my favorite quotes is from Nelson Mandela, who said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." So let's get this done. We're thrilled to be launching at Dartmouth. Thank you, and I will talk to you a little later.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. That's perfect. Thank you all for being here. My name is Christy Clemens. I'm an assistant vice president at Dartmouth and the co-director of the Dialogue Project. So Aditi and Joseph are 2 of 8 brave students who stepped forward in January, February, sometime in the winter, to record conversations for us. And we're so excited to launch this on a larger scale. Some of the folks who participated are here this afternoon, and you will hear from them directly. But first, let's hear some excerpts from the conversations that were recorded.
My name is Aditi.
My name is Mac. I'm 19 years old.
I'm 22 years old.
I'm at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire.
And I'm here with my One Small Step conversation partner.
I was born in Rome to Albanian immigrants.
I didn't grow up in the middle of a cornfield, but I did grow up in a town surrounded by cornfields.
How would you describe your political beliefs?
I vote and registered as a Democrat.
I do tend to lean more conservative.
I'm a Republican.
One Small Step is really important to learn about the backgrounds and experiences of people throughout campus you might not normally run into.
It allows us to sit down and work through the problem underneath the problem.
Even if we don't come to an agreement, we understand what place the other person's position is coming from.
Honestly, the discussions are so much better when you can say, hey, I might not agree with that, but I'd love to hear more about why you think that way.
There's so many more nuances underneath the surface that you can only know if you take the time to speak to someone.
It was great to meet you. I really enjoyed it.
I learned so much from this conversation.
So thank you for sharing all of it.
Yeah, thank you. This has been really great.
For us. I'd love to invite the student participants who are here to just stand and come up to the front. We'll have you introduce yourself and then ask you a couple questions. Keep putting you on the spot. Thank you. Yeah, you can just stand in front of the chairs, that's fine. So I'm gonna, there we go, perfect. So I'll ask you just to introduce yourself in your class year, that we've met some of you already. And then could you share a little bit about why you wanted to participate in One Small Step?
My name is Joseph. You heard my clip, my conversation. I'm a 24, so a senior at Dartmouth. The reason I wanted to be involved with this is because I think it's obvious to everybody that there definitely is an issue with free conversation on college campuses. And I think the way to change that is to change the culture around those conversations. And a great way to do that is to learn about the other person before you learn about their political views, so that you can build that personal bridge beforehand.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm also 24, senior here at Dartmouth. And I really wanted to participate in this program because I think it's very similar to what Joseph said, just so important to be able to speak with other students and other people as people. And I've had many experiences wanting to share some of my beliefs or my values with other people and being shot down pretty quickly. And so I just thought this was such a great opportunity to kind of build on what it means to actually have these productive conversations.
Great. Hi, I'm Carson. I'm a 25, so I'm a junior here at Dartmouth. And I was really interested in participating with Small Step here at Dartmouth because
I'm a government major here, so I'm steeped in a lot of politics and sometimes the division between all of it. And so I really wanted to kind of take a step back and say, how can we kind of learn from each other much better and have these productive conversations that, you know, in the classroom setting can be very helpful, but sometimes can be really divisive. And how can we foster a conversation and learn more about someone on campus that you might not run into in your normal everyday life, and how you can find a lot of commonalities through that. And so I really enjoyed kind of the experience and learning from Kelly, who was my partner.
Hi, I'm Adithi. I'm a 24, so senior here. I chose to do this conversation because I had a conversation with a previous person a few weeks before, and I realized that I make this presumption that a lot of people I interact with and spend my 24 hours of the day with share political beliefs with me, or may have not necessarily have conflicting beliefs, but have similar beliefs. And when I had this conversation with this person, I knew I was just shocked because the things he was telling me were things that I just did not think he believed in, or I would befriend someone with such beliefs that were in conflict with mine. And I realized that when I was having this conversation with this person, I was really reacting as opposed to responding. And in that moment, I really wanted to gain the skills and learn the skills to, engage in conversations with people who do not have the same beliefs that I do. So yeah, and I think I definitely learned that through this. And I'm, again, really open to learning more through initiatives like this, as well as we enter our adult lives.
Thank you. So I heard from each of you some reflections, some reasons why you were interested in doing this in the first place. It's been a couple of weeks. Have you thought back on the conversation, and have you changed anything that you've done in your interactions or about the way that you approach conversations with folks? You don't all have to answer, so don't feel pressure, but I'll just put it whoever wants it. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing that I was reflecting on after having my conversation with Carson was immediately after walking out of the room, I'm like, man, I don't know if I really articulated myself all that well. And then listening to the interview, I was like, yeah, I really did articulate myself all that well, which is fine because that's, the purpose was to get to know each other, not necessarily articulate myself perfectly. But that helped me to recognize that that is something that I want to get better at, is being able to articulate myself in a way that is respectful and engaging and wanting to, opening up a conversation, being willing to listen to someone else while still being able to explain myself and what I think and ask questions. So this just kind of encouraged me to think about how I want to approach these types of conversations in the future.
I'll follow up and first say that Kelly articulated herself very well, so you don't need to be concerned about that. But I think one thing that I took away was Kelly and I differed a lot on kind of the role of religion in our lives. So I come from a background where, I have very few knowledge about religion whatsoever. And Kelly came from a much more religious background. And so I got to learn a lot from her through our conversation together about the role of religion in her life. And it actually sparked a lot of conversations that I had with a lot of my friends here on campus about kind of how religion impacts their life and kind of learning about different morals and values that kind of pervade everyone's different lives. That we come from all kind of different paths, but kind of we all share some fundamental values that are really important to us. And I think kind of having my conversation with Kelly really sparked an interest in learning more about that. So it's really great.
Yeah, I think one thing that I really took away from my conversation with Joseph was how much thought he puts into why he believes what he believes in. And I realized that I kind of blindly believe a lot of things just because of the people I'm surrounded by, my parents, and my general liberal beliefs. And I really was inspired by how much we each wrote a bio, and then we had to read each other's bios out loud in the beginning of the conversation. And I distinctly remember in his bio, he said something along the lines of the thing that he values most in people is people who've given enough thought to why they believe what they believe. And that really resonated with me because it's so easy to just take a belief and say you believe that, and this is how I align, and this is how I identify, et cetera, without really processing it and internalizing it. So after that conversation, I really took that to heart and started thinking about why do I believe what I believe? Why do I identify with these certain, categories and labels? But yeah, I think that's something that was just a good reminder.
One insight I got, because I was thinking, why is it that on college campuses we do have these problems on communication? And what I realized in our conversation was that we had about it wasn't shown in the clip, we had about a 10-minute stint where we got very philosophical, started talking about our religious differences, etc. And I think at very high-octane intellectual places like a college campus, it's very easy to get caught up in abstract concepts, and you can argue about that all day, but then we forget that actually we're talking about two individual lives, and bringing that back to that level was very important.
Thank you. And my final question for you, noting that 3 of you are 24s and are moving on to exciting new futures, and that this is the beginning of our partnership with One Small Step, what would you share with your fellow students or other community members about this experience, and whether they would want to participate in it, or any advice?
You should definitely participate. It was just an amazing experience. As a psychology major who's going into psych and neuro and mental health, I'm just really interested in learning about people. And I think, we just, as we go on with our lives in this very individualistic world, we forget that each person carries an individual story. And the more we get to know that story, the more we see through their layers and get to know the heart of them. So I think it's just a wonderful opportunity. I did not know Joseph before this, and I learned that we frequent the library often, and we're always on FF, the first floor of the library. I never really knew of him or talked to him. So it's crazy the lives that are just being lived amongst you, and it's just so easy to, get narrow-minded and just be within your own bubble. But there's so many people around you that can be a light in your life, that can inspire you, that can open your mind to different things. And why not take this opportunity to open your mind to a new way of living?
I'll follow up on that. I think one of the greatest experience and takeaways that I got from my conversation was just learning about the diversity here on campus, but how we can foster that in a very positive way. And so there's so much that we can learn from one another and your classmates that you might not meet through the classroom or just walking on the green, that, when you sit down and have a 15-minute conversation about, how do some of your beliefs form, how does your background inform kind of how you get to your everyday beliefs, thoughts, values, and understanding that there's a lot of commonality on this campus, even though it might not seem like it on the surface. And so for a lot of students who want kind of this engaging discussion and thoughts that kind of you might not get in the classroom every day, I think it was an amazing experience for me, and I learned a lot more about not just kind of your partner, but also about yourself. You become a lot more introspective, and you learn a lot more about how did I form that belief, or kind of why did that belief come to be that way, and you kind of learn a lot more about yourself through that process as well. So it's a growth for both kind of your own mind, your partner's mind, but I think for the campus writ large, and so it's an amazing positive experience to that.
I'm going to give some advice, just assuming you're going to participate. And I would just say, going into a conversation, I definitely went into the conversation with a slight bit of worry of, I have to kind of do my research and make sure I know about this thing and whatnot. But I would just suggest going into these conversations just wanting to just talk about yourself, and just wanting to talk about your background, and you are not defending an entire party, you're not defending an entire whatever type of system, you're just explaining how you got to those places. And so I think that just kind of helped me get a lot more comfortable in my conversation with Carson, was realizing oh yeah, I'm not standing for half the country here or whatever. I'm just explaining how I got there. So that was pretty cool.
I think participation into something like this is a given, because intellectually we all know that dialogue with the opposing side is something we should do. However, I think we can also recognize that one conversation isn't it. We did this, it was great, but then what? For the underclassmen, I would say, please get involved in this project, but then go to the club meetings of the opposing political party. There are events on campus all the time that we tend to self-select and not go to. And leaving Dartmouth as a senior, I hope to do that myself and make a conscious effort to go beyond who my usual friends would be.
Great. Thank you all so much for giving us these great insights and for participating. Let's give a round of applause to our students. Thank you. Have a seat. Thank you. so fun to have live and in-person students sharing their experiences, but now we have even more live and in-person. I am thrilled to introduce Dartmouth President Sian Beilock and Professor of Physics and Astronomy Marcelo Gleiser, who will join Dave in discussing our vision for one small step and collaborative dialogue at Dartmouth. A cognitive scientist, President Beilock is one of the world's leading experts on the brain and body factors influencing performance anxiety. In her research, writing, and public speaking, she offers evidence-based strategies that can be used to perform well under pressure in all contexts, from test taking to golf. In January, Sian launched Dartmouth Dialogues, a wide-ranging series of initiatives that showcase our commitment to programming across the institution that facilitates conversations and skills bridging personal and political divides. I'm thrilled that the Dialogue Project is a signature initiative under this umbrella. A world-renowned theoretical physicist, Marcelo Gleiser is the Appleton Professor of Natural Philosophy. He is the 2019 Templeton Prize laureate, an honor he shares with such people as Mother Teresa, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and the Dalai Lama. His many books include his recently published The Dawn of a Mindful Universe, which issues an urgent call for the recognition of the preciousness of life as we face the existential crisis of climate change. Please join me in welcoming Sian and Marcelo.
Okay, so welcome everyone. So my job is very easy. I just ask the questions. Hopefully not the last questions I'll be asking in my life, but they'll be important. And I wanted to start with you, Dave. So StoryCorps has been carrying out One Small Step across the country for 7 to 8 years now. What are the key lessons you've learned? Very long answer, probably.
Yes.
But
These are not the last questions you'll ever ask. I do, one of the, we don't have any of our communications people here, but they do hate when I say this, that, StoryCorps really reminds us that we're going to die, which is like the worst sales pitch of all time. But it has a lot in common with hospice. You say those things to the people who you love, that you want. In hospice, you say, thank you, I love you, forgive me, I forgive you. Whether if you're dying or if you have a loved one who's dying. Mm-hmm. And that's what happens in the booth every day. These are not your final questions. So learned a lot of things. I mean, first of all, I've learned a lot just now listening to you guys. I mean, I think this was, if you think about what we see in the media, like what just happened here, it was like historic. I mean, you never, ever hear anything like this. I can't imagine how proud you were listening to you guys. I mean, I think that you articulated everything. I mean, I think that idea that people are good. All of you kind of said this, that, I mean, why are we here on Earth except to experience other people and be surprised? And, we live in these silos and it's incredibly depressing in this world now where, we're fed information about the other side, that they're crazy and they're evil and they're going to try and, destroy you. And that leads, that makes, it's misery, and it leads to kind of mental illness and isolation. And you guys are showing what it can be. So I was incredibly proud to hear you guys talk. So, goodness of people, as one of you said, we're developing this as we go along. We've launched for 2 years. We've been developing for 8 years. But we're going to figure out what the second steps are, and the third small step, and the fourth small step. And we're just going to keep fighting this fight because, look, it's a long shot. It's a David and Goliath fight, but we've got to do this because I think the future of our democracy is at risk. So I was just so honored to hear you guys talk. Thank you.
That's wonderful. So Sian, so in this political moment, what does it feel like to be a college president? That's not all, there is more. And in light of the recent congressional hearings and headlines about free expression on college campuses, what are the key lessons for higher ed and for Dartmouth?
I get the hard questions. Yeah. First of all, I am so proud. I was almost in tears watching you guys and just really excited that Dartmouth is embarking on this initiative with one small step and that Dean Smith and Christy Clemens are leading this. I mean, it's so amazing to see this happen. And it was one of the reasons I was attracted to Dartmouth because I do believe that there is a real sense of community and people are always working to make it better. And that community and the idea that you do talk to people up close is one of the recipes for understanding differences and learning. But it's hard to be a college president right now, going back to your original question. And it's interesting actually listening to the students and talking about who you are as a person and your experiences and how you got to your beliefs. And it really dawned on me that I spend a lot of time making sure that my own specific personal beliefs are not what necessarily the institution is talking about. Because I worry that if the institution takes a particular stand, then that will quell dialogue on one side of an issue. And so my goal as president is to make sure that we have the broadest swath of opinions at the table and people feel comfortable pushing against each other. And so it's, every day I work and think about that. How can we create environments where students, faculty, staff, alums are not self-censoring, where people feel like they can push against each other, where they feel like they can get to know people even who really feel differently, because at the end of the day, we are about excellence, we are about generating knowledge and impact, and I firmly believe that the data is very clear that you do that when you get different people with different lived experiences feeling like they can all be at the table pushing at each other.
That's wonderful. Okay, another one for you, Sian. Sorry. So universities are uniquely challenged to prioritize free expression and inclusivity. Where do we draw the line between encouraging diversity of opinion and allowing views that may be offensive or even hateful?
Look, I mean, my number one goal is to make sure that we keep our campus and community safe. That is really important. And I think that goal is necessary to have the kinds of hard conversations we're trying to have. And so that's how I approach these situations, that is my number one goal. I will always err on the side of that. And that allows us really to push, to have the hard conversations, to understand that what one person says is not who they are as a person, that people might make mistakes. And I come back to my role as a psychologist, and I think a lot about this concept called the fundamental attribution error. And Aditi knows it, and it's the whole idea that we tend to essentially decide a person is good or bad, or they are their action. And in essence, what I think, or their belief, and I think what StoryCorps is doing here is showing that it's much more complex than that, and that you can disagree with someone's idea or belief and really have lots of commonalities and really value many of the same things. And so I think a lot about that in terms of how we create these environments.
All right, since we are on this kind of sphere, one more for you, and then we'll go back to Dave. So one big lesson from this political moment is that we as a society are not good at talking about complex, controversial issues. So what role can Dartmouth play in creating an environment where we can disagree more constructively, which is what you guys are doing in a beautiful way. But
yeah. I mean, I think we are doing it, and I'm so proud of our faculty, our students who have really showcased this. I think what our faculty in Jewish and Middle Eastern Studies did after October 7th was the epitome of being brave and showcasing and modeling how you can talk across difference in a public space. And I think we have to keep on doing it and show, I do believe, the most exciting thing about being president here is that we are training the next generation of leaders across the broadest swath of society who will go out and in education and business and politics, in the nonprofit world, and have an impact. And if we can learn with you about how to listen to each other, how to have humility, how to have the courage to approach uncomfortable situations, I think, I can't think of anything more important right now.
Wonderful. Okay, Dave, now back to you.
Okay.
You have to ask him a hard
Yeah,
question.
Okay, a super hard one. What are your dreams for what happens at Dartmouth with one small step? If you could think about what will happen, with this, what would be your best outcome that you could envision?
Well, I thought you were going to ask me a really hard one. This is a hard StoryCorps question. What was the worst moment of your life?
I'll improvise.
Well, I think that one of the things we talk about there are a bunch of things come to mind. I mean, look, the dream is that Dartmouth can, as I said, show the country that it is possible for us to see the human being across the divides. One of the things that there's a ground game and an air game with One Small Step here at Dartmouth and across the country, and we're about to go national in the coming months. And the ground game are these conversations, and the air game are just showing people that this is possible. Social norming, the fact that we can talk across divides. And there's also something called perceptual polarization that's going on in this country that I touched on, that we think, and you guys said this as well, we think we're far more different from each other than we actually are. I mean, the numbers are skewed beyond belief. And actually just listening to you guys, I think that there's a perception about college students now, which is completely off. And if we can get these conversations out there and can hear that who students actually are, that again, you guys can show the country how it can be done. So my dream is that Dartmouth models for the country a new way of being, and that we can pull ourselves back from the brink. I think we're at a really, someone said, this is an existential crisis for the country. And this election, what's coming up in 2024, I mean, I think we know, it's almost like we're standing in the sunlight, not here literally, but there is darkness coming our way. It's going to be a very serious issue after the election. If it's close, each day that the election isn't decided is going to be a very, very difficult moment for this country. And we've got to try and find a way out. So it would be Dartmouth helping us find the way out.
Are you going to expand to other campuses as well? Are you in conversation with other schools?
So this is the first, and there are a lot of campuses that are approaching us now.
Great.
But we have a big head start here at Dartmouth, and this will be a learning environment for One Small Step as well, and we're going to take the lessons learned from here and spread them to campuses all over the country.
Right. So you've said this before, but you've been exposed to some remarkable conversations and human experiences across time, right? How did that impact you as a human being, as a person yourself in your life?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's impacted. As I said earlier, essentially because of the nature of these conversations, again, I want to stress that really people are talking about, it's the passing of wisdom from one generation to the next and between human beings. So I've learned every important lesson in my life from listening to these StoryCorps conversations. But I think more than the way that it's changed me, and Sian said this, you never assume the worst in others. As I said before, no one is the worst thing they've ever done. People are basically good. It's made me much, much, much more hopeful. And again, we live in a hopeless time, a very cynical time. This is a great country, and people are have so much potential. And we have, there are two directions we can take. And I'm really hoping that we can go on the road that's going to lead us to a stronger, better country, because the other road is not pretty. More than anything, it's made me much more hopeful. I'm much, much more hopeful than I was when I started this. I think I've always been kind of an introvert and a little bit, scared of other people. And there's probably a psychology to this. Why I started StoryCorps and trying to find secrets. And the secret that I've learned is that there's nothing to be scared of.
I think you have to take one small step to the Congress.
We're doing that too.
Oh, are you?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. That is the ultimate challenge, but we are doing that.
That's fabulous. Okay, Sian, one for you. How can the Dartmouth community members get involved? So this is like the tell us what to do to get involved in this.
Well, fortunately, I have some notes on that. So we're really excited to get the community involved. And the week of May 20th is going to be the next opportunity to participate. And the deadline to apply is April 22nd. You can sign up today. Students, faculty, staff, alums can be applied to be matched. And one thing that I think is really exciting that I know came from Dean Smith and Christy Clemens working on this is that Upper Valley residents can apply to be matched with Dartmouth community members. And I just think this is amazing because I've talked a lot about how Dartmouth is just not in the community, but of the community. And I'm really excited about thinking about these matches.
Wow, that's wonderful.
And there's a code that you can scan right behind me to learn more.
I see people are
And
taking
I
out
want to
their
say
phone.
one other thing, that in order for this to work, we need equal numbers of conservatives and liberals. So if you're a liberal, tap a conservative friend if you have one. If you're a conservative, tap a liberal friend. Make sure that we bring everybody into this conversation.
Have you ever thought, this is completely improvised now,
Yes,
so
that's okay.
forgive. Have you ever thought of also bringing people of different religious beliefs? You may have done that already. Because that can be very-
Sandy, again, our CEO, we've been talking a lot about this. One small step is, obviously, we bring people of different religious beliefs together just through one small step. I think we've created a methodology that we now know works in this very difficult paradigm of across political divides. And we've made the decision in the last couple of weeks that in the coming years, we are going to start doing really some of the other really difficult divisions in the country. So yeah, I think, again, just the concept of bringing strangers together and getting to know each other as human beings is just critical to mending the fabric of our country. So yes, we are going to be doing that. Give us a couple years.
Yeah, no.
Maybe we'll test that at Dartmouth as well.
You're welcome back.
Well, thank you so much. We have a few minutes. We don't want you to stay too late with who knows what's happening outside. But if there are one or two questions for our esteemed panelists, we'd love to bring a mic to you and have you ask a question.
Hi, thank you for coming tonight. So one thing that kind of stuck in my head that you mentioned was, that people have this false belief that the other side, wants to destroy them, that they hate them. And for some people, that is true. I will say, just speaking from my personal experience as a trans person, and there are many other people who experience this in different ways, it is currently considered a political belief, and in fact, a mainstream political belief of a mainstream party, that I should not be able to exist equally in society. They're using the word eradicate, they're using the word filth. And so I guess my question is, I'm sure that you've dealt with conversations like this, where this one person on the side of the conversation is necessarily disadvantaged in that way. It's asymmetrical. How do you deal with that kind of asymmetry in your conversations?
That's a great question. So, first of all, I think the word nuance has come up a lot here, and I think that's something that's been lost. And first of all, the StoryCorps is about doing no harm. And we make sure that no harm is done in these conversations. We have all kinds of fail-safes put in place so that harm isn't done. But again, I think that we're talking about the fringes who are very loud. The idea of dehumanization is at the core of One Small Step and the core of StoryCorps. That toxic polarization, the language that you just used, when we can't see each other as human beings, we know where that leads. It leads to slavery, it leads to Rwanda, it leads to the Holocaust. And that's what we're fighting against through One Small Step every day. So I would like to think that the vast majority of people in an opposed, that the language that you're hearing comes from a very, very small percentage of people, and that the vast majority of people who are conservative do not believe that. And I think it's worth having those conversations with people, and and learning who they are and having them learn who you are as well. You know, I think one of the models for One Small Step that we use every day is marriage equality. And I think all of the great social movements of our time, if you look at Gandhi or you know, King or marriage equality, and I've spent a lot of time with Evan Wolfson, who headed up marriage equality, that, you know, their efforts were all based on love and based on an assumption that if you're not with us, you're not with us yet. And if we can be authentic with each other, I think that it has the possibility to wipe away, you know, the greatest prejudices, and we just have to come towards each other. And that's what I believe, and that's what I hope.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I know it's getting a little later, and we do hope some of you will, all of you, will stay at the reception. You'll have some more opportunity to ask your questions at the reception. So just in closing, I want to thank Dave and Marcelo and Sian, and of course, thank our students for being here, and thank you for participating in the project and for cultivating these collaborative dialogue skills and for encouraging community members to also participate. I want to thank you for joining us today, and I encourage you to sign up to participate. Again, please know that we're going to do recordings on May 20th, and the sign-up deadline is April 22nd. This spring, the Dialogue Project is going to share updates about the future related programming, including additional opportunities to train in One Small Step facilitation. So that's a really important component of this project, is that we won't have One Small Step with us forever, but we want to continue the work, and so we will be training facilitators. And so now I hope you will join us at our reception, and thank you again for being here today.